Well, welcome everyone. We're here today to kind of continue a conversation that we actually started last year. My name is Brian Lohse. I serve in the Iowa House of Representatives. And last year we talked about food deserts and grocery stores in rural, especially rural grocery stores. And as a result of that, we actually did something about it this year. We filed a bill. I filed a bill. Annette Sweeney in the Senate filed one in the Senate, talking about how we can incentivize grocery stores to come into rural communities and in those food deserts. Like I said, my name is Brian Lohse, and the panel here, some good friends of mine. Mr. DeVries, I think this is our first time ever meeting, but otherwise, good friends of mine up here on the panel, and appreciate them being here. If it takes take a minute and just introduce each of you, and then we'll get into the conversation.
You first. All right, my name is Teresa Davis. I own West 40 Market in Uptown Ankeny. It's an all Iowa meat market. I source from about 7 Iowa farmers who raise it almost solely just for us. We use 2 local lockers that do all of the processing every 2 weeks. We bring it all back and we stock the shelves. So we give the community basically a retail store to walk into to be able to shop and get access to Iowa cuts of meat. And then we also give obviously an outlet for farmers to be able to source and get their food out there, their hard work, 24/7 and 365 days a year. We also have a full online store so people can shop online. And we ship meat nationwide, which is really cool. So we're able to send everything all over the place. My parents also own West 40 Market in Green, Iowa, small town in northeast Iowa that I grew up in. They actually purchased that grocery store about 5 years ago to save it so that it wouldn't shut down. It's been in that town for over 70 years. And so I'm kind of representing both of us today. So
Thank you. Jared?
My name's Jared DeVries. I was born and raised in Iowa. Went to University of Iowa. I went off to Detroit to play professional football for 12 years. Came back to Iowa to run and manage grocery stores. I also farm. My family lives in Clear Lake, Iowa. And yeah, we have 21 retail stores in 3 states.
Chad Ingels. I'm a farmer from Fayette County and also a state representative. I represent parts of 3 counties in northeast Iowa. When I'm farming, I raise corn, soybeans, and hogs. When I'm at the legislature, I focus on ag issues and education and economic development.
I'm Sami Scheetz. I represent Cedar Rapids in the Iowa House, born and raised in Cedar Rapids. And food insecurity is one of the issues that I've been most focused on in my short term in the legislature. This will be my 2nd year, so very excited to be here and talk today.
Thank you. And just point out, I mean, one of the food insecurity in rural grocery stores, it's not a partisan issue. This is, we have representatives, Republican, Chad and I serve on one side of the aisle, and Sammy's on the other side of the aisle. So, and we work together quite well, and that is one thing that I'm very appreciative of in the House is just how well we work together on a bipartisan level. So, as I said, last year we had this conversation about rural grocery stores and how we can incentivize people to either stay in the rural communities, but also how we can incentivize bringing them in. And as a result of that, we sat down and crafted a bill. And Chad, you were assigned this bill to floor manage. I filed it, but Chad, tell us about House File 2599, the Grocery Reinvestment Program. What did that bill do, and what was it aimed at?
Yep, so the bill was very simply a grant program that would provide funds for small grocers, generally in underserved areas. And I guess coming from a rural area, I was thinking small towns. But as we worked on the bill, I also learned there's a lot of urban areas that are underserved and for grocers as well. The initial bill would provide $2 million per year for 2 years. That would allow the grocers to seek funds for capital improvements, technology improvements, increase capacity of their stores to be able to better serve their customers. Through the course of the process and how things work at the legislature, there's a lot of discussion that goes on as a bill moves through the process. And as a floor manager and sponsor of a bill, you really need to be flexible. People come with ideas on how to change it, how to improve it. So we worked on that. Through that course of that, I added a component to the bill that would provide funding for fruit and vegetable processing. As I've learned more through this process, farmers do a great job of growing things locally, but to actually get the consumer or customer to use it, they like to see it further processed before they buy it, especially not just individuals, but if we're looking at schools or other outlets, businesses, they want those products pre-processed so they can use them much more easily. We didn't make it all the way through the process this time around, but I've learned that good ideas don't always scoot right through the first try. So we'll continue to work on that. I think we've got some good footing. There was good support. We just came down to the funding end of it towards the end of session. We just didn't quite make through. And some background how I kind of learned through this process. My first term in the legislature in 2021, I sponsored the Butchery Innovation Grant that did go through that year, and we've actually appropriated nearly $3 million over the last 3 years for small lockers to increase capacity, buy capital improvements, and better serve their customers, the farmers, and the customers on the consuming end. To build on that, 2 years ago, we had a dairy innovation grant program, and that took 2 years before we were able to get that through and fund it. So hopefully things get easier once they're in place. When you have something in place, it's much more easy to continue funding than it is for new funding. And so we're kind of working on that, but certainly a focus on getting more local food, more easily accessible to the consumer, whether small towns, urban areas.
And congratulations, Chad, as a freshman legislator getting a bill to the governor's desk. It's a rare feat, and I'm a little jealous about that. But so anyway, Teresa, you have a meat locker. I'm not a meat locker, but someone who works with meat lockers. Your parents own a grocery store in Greene, a small rural community. I'll just hark back real quick to one of the things that I see as I was crafting this bill, and I've seen in various communities, is local meat lockers that are then expanding into grocery stores. And I think it's an interesting process. I take the deer that I hunt down to Milo. Their meat locker has expanded into a grocery store. I think this is a real growth area where I hope this bill can, if it gets across the finish line, can expand on that. But first, tell us a little bit more about Greene and what your parents went through, and why did they start that grocery store or buy that grocery store?
Yeah, so like I said, it was up for sale. It's been in the town for 75, I think, years, maybe pushing 80. And it was just a staple in that town. It's a town of about 1,100 people. And so, they honestly, they did it to save it because it was, we have a large population of elderly, of shut-ins. We had a really big nursing home there at the time. And my parents kind of looked at that and said, if that grocery store shuts down, where are they going to get their food? And the nearest grocery store is 20 miles away, right? And some of these people depend on this grocery store literally dropping food off on their doorstep because, like I said, they're shut-ins. And so they didn't do it. They're retirement age. They didn't do it to make any money. They did it to save the community, really. And so it's obviously got its share of problems. And, we talk about freezers going down and all of that kind of stuff. It's a constant. It's a battle. It's not getting deliveries in, not being, they're just a small little town grocery store. And so sometimes they miss the truck doesn't show up, or whatever the case might be. So they also source and put some of our own meat. So the beef that I have in my store is raised on my parents' farm. And so they do have some of that and some local pork that's raised there as well too. And so they kind of are able to also not only provide that service for the town of having an actual grocery store with your essentials in it, but they're able to also then introduce some locally raised items to some of those folks in that town too. So.
And you mentioned you work in Ankeny with your market there. You work with local meat markets.
Yep.
As we are looking at, and I'm hoping maybe some of the meat lockers that you work with may be able to then expand into grocery stores, because those are often in rural areas. What issues are you seeing that meat lockers are having that we as legislators and Chad as the meat locker king over there, what can we do to help them, and what challenges they face and we may be able to help with?
Sure. Yeah. I think now it's probably getting a little bit better, but we're booked 2 years out for these lockers. I have standing appointments every 2 weeks at these lockers to make sure that I can keep things kind of moving. And so, I know that some of the things that they run into is obviously equipment, and we use Elma Locker a lot, and they're a small town locker that's been there for years and has really old equipment. And I know sometimes our stuff is delayed because the smoker goes down, or the machine's not working, and those machines aren't cheap. It costs a lot of money, and so at least for the feedback that I get from them, that's often the conversation of, I've got stuff going down and I can't afford to fix it right now. I have a freezer that went down. Thanks, to Brick Street Market back in the day, they saved me a few times with the freezer because I had freezers that went down. And so I think that's a huge challenge for them. And also just, it's kind of getting back to that mindset and getting the communities back to that mindset of you can buy local. It is affordable. And I don't know, I know I've never owned a locker, and so I don't know the exact story there, but I think a lot of them have maybe gone away from the retail because they just didn't have the people going in to shop for it because they didn't know that. That's almost, for a lot of folks that especially didn't grow up in Iowa or on a farm, that's a new concept. And I'm seeing that even in my store in Ankeny. And so, I know that Story City, we partner with them a lot, and they're starting to maybe kind of build that retail spot back in their store as well too. But for a while they went away from it, especially, around that COVID time, because they were so busy with demand of people, butchering for themselves, for, official or people like myself that were trying to stock a store, that they didn't have, not only did they not have the people coming in to shop the retail space, but they didn't really have capacity. It actually made more sense for them to utilize the locker side of it, and push that out the door versus trying to set both the locker side and an actual retail space. The retail side of it's not easy, so I would assume juggling the two is a little challenging.
Thank you. Jared, little story I haven't shared with you yet. As we're crafting the grocery reinvestment program, there's a process of writing the bill, and we go through many iterations before we actually file it. And I sat in the basement of the Capitol with the liaison for the Iowa Economic Development Authority, and we're trying to get our mind around who we want to target with these particular funds. What types of grocery stores, what size of grocery stores? Do we want Fairway? Do we want Hy-Vee? And I love both organizations. I have to say that to Fairway in case Garrett Picklap is here. But now that they own the grocery store. But one of the things that we were trying to focus on is, and I made the decision, I wanted this to be rural-minded, small, family-owned type grocery stores, mom and pop type stuff. But we also didn't want it just limited to one-offs, like your parents, they have one grocery store. We want to be able to say, okay, it's a place like Brothers. That's, I've known about Brothers for quite a while, shopped in a couple. We wanted to be able to expand that. And I actually sat down and looked at your website and said, how big is Brothers? So we make sure that Brothers is able to get into this program. So you're the reason we have, the limit was 10. So we wanted to make sure you were available. So, Jared, obviously, you and your brother started Brothers Grocery Stores, and you've continued to expand. Why rural communities? Where your focus has really been rural communities. Why that focus?
Yeah. The reason we chose rural communities, obviously we grew up in a rural community, and we as brothers think grocery stores are one of the pillars of a community. And Felicia talked about it earlier. You're building a community. And without a grocery store, we felt like you don't really have a community. And growing up in a small town in Applington, we joined with Parkersburg. We view it as one community now, but in the day, it was just Applington and it was just Parkersburg. I grew up in Applington. We had a grocery store, Dean's Market. We shopped there as much as we could. Dean's Market went away. The community started to die. So when the tornado came through Parkersburg in 2008, Blake and Kathy Simon had run S&S Foods there for a long, long time. They weren't willing to rebuild because they're at the age of retirement. So my brothers and I got together and we're like, we can't let that happen. So we took it upon ourselves to rebuild that store, and then it kind of expanded from there. But to answer your question, why rural is, we know the value of small town communities, and we want to give back to that. It has challenges, but that's kind of been our initiative.
So as you're looking, and you've expanded from Parkersburg, you expanded, what, 20 some?
Yeah, and that includes some other retail stores as well.
Okay.
But yeah.
So as you're looking at expanding, what are you looking at in a rural community to say, okay, this is a place we want to put a grocery store, or this is a place we want to invest in one that may be going away? What are those factors you look at?
Well, there's a lot, and we've talked about it. Really, the communities now are reaching out to us because they're hearing our story, and so that's a factor. One of the panelists before said, you know, you still have to make money. I mean, we're in the business to make money. I mean, yeah, we employ, you know, 250, 300 people, but I mean, we still have to make money to do it. But it's just really, we're not targeting a certain, but a lot of these stores are going away now because they can't afford new equipment. And we feel like if we go in there, put Brothers Market on it and rejuvenate it, the community will hold together and support us.
Okay. As we look forward into next year, Chad and I and Sami look at this bill and refiling it next year, any way that we can improve, or are there specific areas we need to really focus on helping existing grocery stores or helping people who want to start a grocery store in a place that doesn't exist already? Any improvements we can make, and anything we should really focus on?
Well, to me, it comes down to, you know, like we talked about, if equipment goes down, that's a big line item for a small town grocer. Because let's be honest, we don't have the volume. We're not doing hundreds of thousands of dollars a week. We're doing 50,000, 60,000. Well, our budgets are tight. Our margins are tight. So any way you can help with equipment, a reduction of cost, you know, so because really, all that gets passed on to the consumer. If we have something go down, yeah, we'd like, but we have to keep the lights on. And if that, you know, if our costs go up, we have to pass that along to the customer, unfortunately. So we can stay open.
Great. You know, as we came out of last year, I was really focused on rural grocery stores, and that's kind of where my heart was, and obviously DeVries brothers, you guys have that's been where your guys' focus on. But something popped up this last year, just recently in Cedar Rapids, and that's why we invited Sami here to talk about. Most of you probably have heard the Hy-Vee in several communities, but particularly in Cedar Rapids. Pulled out of Cedar Rapids. I think there's a long story behind that. But Sami, what is Cedar Rapids in that particular area of Cedar Rapids now focused? And tell us a little bit more about what happened with Hy-Vee there.
Yeah, so we've had in downtown Cedar Rapids a Hy-Vee for decades, and unfortunately we found out a couple months ago that due to financial reasons they were going to be pulling the store. Unfortunately, it's in one of the most racially and socioeconomically diverse neighborhoods in our city, and so immediately a lot of us had concerns about where people were going to go and get food. A lot of the people don't have cars, they have to take a bus, or they either have to walk to go get their groceries, and this Hy-Vee was kind of perfectly situated in between these two neighborhoods for people to go walk and get their groceries and critically medicine as well. So since then, our city government, the city of Cedar Rapids, has been working to find some sort of long-term replacement, but we have been looking at kind of short-term solutions because immediately after, people are asking the question, where am I going to go get food? How am I going to feed my family? Where am I going to go get my medicine? So as a temporary solution, I worked with our school district, our county government, and our city to actually use one of our elementary schools as a meal site. They already provide free meals for kids 18 and under, but I went to some of our local governments and said, hey, if we raise some money, can we feed adults as well? And so actually last week we were able to open Johnson STEAM Academy in Cedar Rapids in that neighborhood for kids and adults to go eat as well. And while that is a really cool achievement, and I'm very grateful that my governments in Cedar Rapids took action to make that happen, it's not a permanent solution. It's going to last for, a month or two, but that's why we're having this discussion today, because not just in rural Iowa, in urban cities, across our state, we're seeing these food deserts come up where people are having challenges to go find food, to find transportation to get food, and critically in a lot of these grocery stores, like I said earlier, to find their medicine. A lot of the programs, Hy-Vee was actually really gracious when they closed the store in Cedar Rapids and offered some temporary services with Hy-Vee aisles and delivering medicine, but some medications, especially for people with severe mental health issues, aren't legally allowed to be delivered through the mail. So those grocery stores that oftentimes have pharmacies are actually really critical in that sense too. I guess the point that I'm trying to get across is, even though we do know critically this is a problem in rural Iowa, I want folks to know this is a problem in some of our biggest and most wealthy cities too.
When we talk about rural food deserts, it's really easy to define. I mean, you got to drive 20 miles, 30 miles, to get to any sort of grocery store. But thinking about it from an urban standpoint, how can we best define and thinking, and I'm going to put you on the spot here, but
Yeah.
and also keep thinking about this as we head into next year. How would you see we need to define what an underserved community is when it relates to an urban area? Because we can't really talk in terms of miles. So how can we talk, and what terms do we need to use?
So there are federal standards. I'm not going to remember off the top of my head exactly what the levels are for kind of like underserved or impoverished neighborhoods. Those two in Cedar Rapids do qualify. The food desert that has been created right now, the most accurate number is around 1.5 to 2 miles is what people have to travel. And obviously with a car, that's not an issue. The problem is in a lot of these working class neighborhoods, people don't have the means to either have a car or use transportation constantly. And so in a city like Cedar Rapids, whereas to your point in rural Iowa, 1.5 miles is nothing to drive. A lot of this has to be walkable for people in big cities. And unfortunately, when you have a food desert and now a pharmacy desert as well, of 1.5 miles to 2 miles, it makes it really difficult for folks, especially people who are elderly or kids or people with disabilities. It makes it a lot harder for them to access that food. And so, I don't have an exact number, but I'm just telling you, in Cedar Rapids alone, that 1.5 miles has caused a lot of problems, even just in the last couple of weeks.
One of the things that is in the legislature, where I dealt a lot with IT issues and broadband, and as we think too about delivery, and does Brothers deliver in online in
Not online,
not online?
but we do.
Deliver. And I know, Teresa, you have a good online presence and deliver as well and ship. From that standpoint, also, we also think about, well, couldn't they just have their food delivered and go online? But how much of a problem is that even in rural metro areas where some of these underserved communities, do they have access to the internet where they could do that? Or is that also spotty?
No, I mean, I think generally internet is usable in places like Cedar Rapids. Again, it's kind of a money issue too, where you have to have money to pay for internet. The other thing too is that a lot of these programs have kind of like minimum orders. So we saw a lot of people that go in just to buy a loaf of bread or to buy some milk or eggs. That usually doesn't meet the threshold of, what it makes, kind of meets that minimum delivery order. So it kind of can be really challenging for families if how many people in here just stop in to buy one or two things. If you're not able to do that and do that kind of in a timely manner, it makes it challenging for families to figure out what they're going to make, what they're going to eat, et cetera. So again, it's a great short-term solution for Cedar Rapids, and we are grateful that Hy-Vee, specifically in our case, provided that option temporarily. We have to figure out something long-term, and that's why I'm so excited about this legislation that was proposed, because this is looking at the problem systemically, which is what we have to do as a state government, because this is an issue that we're seeing everywhere across our state.
And as the bill is written, and as I mentioned to Jared, we really did do purposefully, and I made that decision. I purposefully meant to get toward the brothers, toward the mom and pops, and love Hy-Vee and I love Fairway, and they're great sources. But one of the things that I've been thinking about, and I ask all of you, if we have a food desert, be it in Cedar Rapids or be it in Loreville, Iowa, and that's where my in-laws lived, they don't have a grocery store. As people may be thinking about putting something in there, should we care about, and should I care that it's a place like Brothers or just a mom and pop or just your mom and pop? If they're willing to step up and buy a grocery store that's failing or put a grocery store in, should I care if it's them, or should I open it up to everyone? And I'm throwing this out to everyone here on the panel. Should I care if it's Fairway and Hy-Vee? Should we open it up to the bigger chains to say, okay, hey, we're willing to do that, and I know Fairway's done that in a few small communities, but should I care? Should I really focus next year on smaller mom and pop type stores? Your thoughts? I'll throw it up to Dahlia.
My personal opinion is you open it up to whoever's willing to do it. If they care enough to save the community to do something like that, I would say do it.
And Jared, I'm especially interested in your opinion. I mean, because you'll be in direct competition with some of the bigger stores, and that, quite frankly, that's why we sold to Fairway. They were coming to Bondurant, and we knew we couldn't really compete. So, how would you feel about that?
Well, it's twofold. When the Cedar Rapids store closed, I can't remember who reached out to us, and I presented it to our group, and they're like, if Hy-Vee can't make it, why do you think Brothers can make it? And I don't know. Maybe there's a way. Maybe there is a way. I don't know, but I'm in agreement. I think you do have to open it up, because if we're talking urban areas, they're the perfect candidates, most likely.
Yeah, especially in urban areas, it seems like the Fairways, the Hy-Vees, those are the more likely candidates. But I suppose to your point too, it's if someone's willing to do it wherever and they need one, then why do we care? So,
Especially I'll just make the point too, especially in these underserved areas, to the point that was made earlier, it's not usually like we have a list of people out the door that are willing to come in and, fight for a spot like this. These, for a reason, are not super profitable areas for grocery stores to be operating in. And the point was made earlier, these are for-profit businesses. It is their right and goal to maximize profit. And so a lot of times it doesn't make sense. The difference is government has a role, in my opinion, to fix that equation. And so this legislation that we're talking about, and what Cedar Rapids did 20 years ago by giving tax incentives to Hy-Vee, there is government in the equation, in my mind, that can help solve for that and make it a viable option for different grocery stores. But I think, in Cedar Rapids, we're going to feel the same way, where if somebody's willing to come in and take kind of that financial risk, hopefully government will be able to help make it more profitable or easy for them. But at the same time, people are willing to step up and help out the community. I think people will be just very excited and grateful.
I'm going to be a little bit of a contrarian, because as the floor manager of the bill, trying to sell the idea to 149 other legislators and the governor, there's going to be a feeling that some of these larger organizations, Fairway, Hy-Vee, have the means to step out and do some of these things that a smaller business does not. So at least to get the program started, I don't think there's an appetite to see it broaden much beyond what it is now, to be successful and show what it can do, and maybe in the future expand that once we get it up and rolling.
And I clearly understand that. Food for thought here, Chad, and I'll throw this question out to you, is as we look at incorporating urban food deserts where the smaller mom and pops probably can't make it a go, is there a way we can bifurcate that and say, okay, in the rural areas, we're going to limit this to smaller mom and pop type shops. In metro areas, we sell it's open to anybody that can come in, and that would include a Fairway or Hy-Vee or Kroger or whoever that might be. Do you think that's a viable option?
I think maybe you would have to look at how you structure the grant program, and maybe have break it into two pieces, and look at it a little more broadly that way. But I certainly think it's something to look at and something to work on, especially when we have a very valid example of what can happen. And if we could use as an example to show here where we're at, and with some initial investment, we can maybe make it better than it was before.
Okay. We actually thought we'd have not a lot of time left. We do have a few minutes left in our time. We had an action-packed agenda, but any last thought? Open it up to each of you. And any last thoughts and any ways that we can truly improve rural communities, metro communities, in those areas, and bring in grocery stores? Any last thoughts that you would like to share?
One thing that's on my mind too, and you had asked the question earlier about like what can we do or what can we give you. I think the resources is a big piece of it. You know, I think back to especially when my parents bought the grocery store in Green. Yes, they did it to save it. It was kind of a quick decision, but they didn't really have any, like, they've never owned a grocery store, right? But they didn't have any resources, and they tapped you guys at Brick Street Market on the shoulder, right? And you were just a huge help because you had been doing what you had been doing for a while, and even some of your employees, your managers went up to Green and spent the entire day and kind of helped work through some of the systems and, you know, your truck orders and things like that. There's so much that goes into it. So I think the resources is really important too, that says, hey, if we're going to help you kind of go in and buy this or do this or stand this thing up, like then, maybe some other resources behind the scenes that kind of helps you to be successful then in what you're doing would be good.
Yeah, for me, you look at Iowa. Iowa is family. Iowa is community. I mean, everybody has talked about, everybody that's been up here. Food is community, grocery stores is community, and anything that we can do to help our communities or help our people, I think we got to go for it.
I guess I'm going to put out a call to action. The three legislators up here need you all to advocate. Just pick one legislator or talk to your people that you work with on this type of issue. Ask them to talk to one legislator about this issue. When they start hearing from people across the state, when the bill pops up, they're going to come start asking questions of us and be a little more engaged. It's really hard when an issue comes up that I have to go sell it to my peers. Representative Lohse has to sell it. Representative Scheetz has to sell it on his side of the aisle. And we're all kind of to get the ball rolling. So we need you all to help kickstart that process.
I guess the last thing I would add for me, and I know for the legislators up here on this panel, I think we have to remind ourselves a lot that our budget is a reflection of our priorities and our values as Iowans, as legislators. And so I'm just extremely grateful to have Representative Lohse and Representative Ingels spearheading this issue so that this isn't a partisan issue. This is a bipartisan issue that people across our state recognize. We have to make sure that people in our state have access to food. And so this is a real statewide effort, a systemic solution to try and at least address this problem. And I'm just grateful that you guys came out today. I'm grateful to be serving with the two of you. And I'm very hopeful that we'll be able to kind of move this forward next legislative session, because I know personally, again, from just the last couple months, how badly Iowans need this.
Yeah, and I want to echo what Chad said in reaching out to your own local legislators, especially your senators. So everybody, I'm going to say that again, especially your senators, because the bill did not go very far in the Senate. They have a different mindset over there. I won't get into that. We all feel it. We all know what I'm talking about. But having you all bring this up and make it a priority and emphasize how much of a priority it is for your legislators, both in the House and the Senate, that does help make our job a lot easier. And hopefully pushes it across the finish line. But I want to thank each of you for coming out, and I know Chad and especially Sami, you all came from, and Jared came from quite a ways away to be here this morning. And just appreciate the perspectives, and we look forward to working on this bill, certainly working with Sami, working with you to incorporate that urban food desert and seeing how we define that best. But I do appreciate you guys being here and appreciate everyone coming out with us today. Thank you.
Thank you.